Welcome to Deep Narratives. We're honored you're here with us today. Before we dive in, tell us, where are you watching from? Which city or country? Let us know in the comments below. We love seeing this community grow worldwide. Today's story concerns resilience, love, and finding family where you least expect it. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel so you never miss these heartfelt stories that touch your soul. Let's begin this journey together. One that will stay with you long after it's told. Clara Hensley stepped down from the creaking stagecoach, the dry Nevada sun beating down on her worn shoulders. The red dust swirled around her boots, carried by a stubborn desert wind that swept across the endless sagebrush plains. Her locket caught the sunlight, glinting faintly as if holding onto a secret no one else knew. Boston felt like a lifetime ago, a place where whispers about her childhood illness followed her like shadows. The scarlet fever had stolen more than her health. It had taken her chance at motherhood, a truth she buried deep within letters no one was meant to read. Ahead, the vast expanse of the desert stretched toward the distant Sierra Nevada peaks, jagged and silent beneath a burning crimson sky. A small, weathered town waited quietly, its residents already murmuring behind cracked windows and dusty storefronts. Jacob Warrick, the widowed rancher she was meant to marry, stood somewhere nearby, strong and reserved, raising 3 children alone after losing his wife to fever. Would he see beyond what society whispered? Could he accept a woman marked by what she could not give? Her heart trembled with a fragile hope as the desert bloom that dared to grow amid the harsh sands. Clara's footsteps echoed on the wooden planks of the town's main street as curious eyes followed her every move. The silence that greeted her was heavy with judgment, but also a whisper of something else. Possibility. What would happen when Jacob learned her secret? Would she be cast away like so many before, or might this broken woman become the heart of a family longing for healing? The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with molten fire as dust danced under the blood-red heavens. Clara clutched her locket tightly and took a breath. She wished she could steady the storm inside her. What followed would change everything, challenging the bitter weight of rejection, uncovering bonds forged through loss and hope, and revealing a strength no one expected. What happened next will leave you speechless. Could a woman society discarded become the soul that completes a home? Clara's footsteps stirred the dust as she crossed the uneven ground toward the Warrick Ranch, a sturdy log cabin standing solitary amid the sprawling Nevada sagebrush. The sun hung low, casting long shadows over the rugged landscape, where wild grasses swayed, and the distant Sierra Nevada mountains loomed hazily under a sky streaked with fading amber. The air was dry and sharp, carrying the faint aroma of cedarwood and earth warmed by the relentless heat. This remote outpost, weather-beaten and proud, bore the marks of survival: faded paint peeling from boards, a rickety fence barely holding against the wind's constant assault, and a porch cluttered with worn tools and crates. A tall figure emerged from the cabin's threshold as Clara drew nearer. Jacob Warrick, his skin bronzed and roughened by years of sun exposure, regarded her with guarded eyes. His frame was broad, shoulders squared with the weight of responsibility, but kindness was buried beneath his wary exterior. The lines across his face told stories of loss and endurance, the kind that only a man who had weathered grief could carry. Behind him, 3 children watched silently, their faces a mixture of curiosity and caution. Lila, the eldest at 11, stood apart, her expression guarded but thoughtful. At 8, Ben, restless and full of questions, peeked from behind his father's leg. Rose, just 5, clutched a ragged doll tightly, her wide eyes shining with innocent hope. Jacob's firm yet respectful voice broke the silence. "Miss Hensley, welcome to our home." His tone held no warmth, but neither did it carry rejection outright. Clara returned a gentle nod, her heart pounding beneath the heavy weight of expectation and dread. She sensed the fragile balance between acceptance and refusal, a line she feared she might never cross. Inside, the cabin was modest but well kept, its wooden floors creaking underfoot. A simple hearth dominated one wall, its embers glowing faintly, casting flickering shadows over hand-hewn furniture and patched quilts. The aroma of stew simmering on the stove mingled with the scent of drying herbs hanging from beams overhead. Sage, lavender, and thyme. This isolated and harsh place seemed to pulse with quiet life, a sanctuary tethered to the unforgiving land. The family gathered around the rough wooden table, plates passed with careful hands. Clara noticed how the children watched her intently, eyes wide with unspoken questions and tentative acceptance. She met Lila's gaze briefly. The girl's quiet demeanor hinted at a guarded soul shaped by the loss of a mother she barely remembered. Ben shifted nervously in his seat, his breathing occasionally interrupted by a wheeze, a reminder of the fragile life he fought to protect in this dry climate. Despite her youth, Rose seemed eager for connection, reaching across the table to brush Clara's hand with a shy smile. The conversation was sparse, weighed down by the unspoken. Clara's thoughts swirled with memories of Boston, the city she had left behind in search of something new, something hopeful. Yet she carried a secret heavier than the worn satchel at her feet, a secret she had buried in letters and silence. A childhood illness, scarlet fever, had left her unable to bear children. The very idea that had kept her isolated, branded as incomplete by the world. She escaped. Now, in this rugged frontier home, that truth threatened to shatter whatever fragile hope she had dared to hold. After dinner, Clara reached for her Bible, a familiar comfort from years past, its pages dog-eared and softened by use. As she turned carefully, a folded paper slipped from between the leaves, fluttering quietly to the floor. Jacob's eyes caught the movement immediately, and he bent down to retrieve the document. The certificate, official and clinical, bore the damning news. Clara's infertility was confirmed. The air thickened as Jacob's expression shifted. The warmth that had briefly softened his gaze hardened into something distant, cold. Without hesitation, he folded the paper and met Clara's eyes. "I expected a wife who could give me more than her presence," he said quietly, the words heavy with unspoken pain and unmet hopes. Clara's chest tightened. Shame and rejection mingled like bitter smoke in her lungs. His gaze flicked away, unable or unwilling to reconcile the woman before him with his imagined future. Instead of offering companionship or a place at his side, Jacob guided Clara toward a small guest room at the house's edge. The room was simple, a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a wooden chair, and a single window framing the dusky plains. The isolation of the space mirrored the hollow ache settling deep within Clara's soul. She placed her satchel on the floor and looked out at the vast desert beyond, the last rays of sun painting the sky in fiery red and purple streaks. The silence around her was profound, broken only by the distant call of a coyote and the whisper of wind through the sagebrush. Yet, amidst the growing shadows, a small light flickered. From the doorway, Rose appeared, clutching her worn doll, and offered Clara a tentative smile. It was shy, fragile, but genuine, a small act of kindness that stirred something guarded inside Clara's heart. This innocent and hopeful smile suggested that acceptance might be possible, even here. It was a reminder that worth could come not from blood or biology, but from love and care, presence and resilience. The ranch itself was a study in contrasts, wild and unforgiving on the outside, yet inside it held the promise of family and home. The isolation of this land matched Clara's loneliness, but it also whispered of new beginnings. The wind that rattled the cabin's windows seemed to carry a challenge, a call to fight for a place where she belonged. Clara knew that proving herself would not be easy. She faced suspicion, judgment, and the heavy burden of her secret. But her resolve was fierce. She would not allow her past to define her future. Outside, the night settled swiftly, stars igniting one by one against the vast black canvas overhead. The desert's stark beauty wrapped around the ranch like a silent guardian. Clara closed her eyes, letting the cool air wash over her, and made a vow. She would fight for this fractured family, for a chance to belong, to matter. No longer would she be the woman discarded by society's cruel standards. Back inside, the children's quiet presence lingered in her thoughts. Lila's wary gaze, Ben's restless energy, and Rose's innocent hope were the threads that might weave her into this new life. She could see the longing in their eyes, a hunger for connection that mirrored her own. If only Jacob could see beyond his fears and losses, perhaps they could all heal together. The creak of the old floorboards echoed faintly in the room as Clara settled onto the narrow bed. Outside, the wind sighed through the desert grasses, carrying the distant promise of change. Her future here was uncertain, precarious, like the fragile desert bloom daring to push through cracked earth. But within her burned a fierce determination, a hope that no rejection, no whispered judgment could extinguish. As the night deepened and the ranch fell into a quiet slumber, a question hung heavy in the stillness. Could Clara win a place in a family that didn't want her? Morning light spilled softly through the thin curtains of Clara's modest guest room, casting pale gold across the rough wooden floor. The early hours in Nevada were quiet and still, a brief reprieve before the desert's unforgiving heat crept across the land. Clara rose silently, careful not to wake the children in the neighboring rooms. Every breath she took carried the faint scent of sagebrush, mingled with the lingering aroma of wood smoke from the ranch's hearth. Determined to prove her worth to Jacob and his children, she moved with purpose, preparing a simple meal of porridge and freshly drawn water from the well. Though her surroundings were stark, Clara found comfort in small routines, a grounding force in an uncertain new life. Outside, the sprawling ranch lay bathed in soft sunlight, the endless sagebrush plains stretching toward distant, jagged peaks. The sky overhead, a vast canvas of pale blue, promised warmth and challenge in equal measure. Clara stepped into the yard and spotted Ben struggling to keep pace with his siblings, each breath ragged and shallow as the desert air tightened its grip on his fragile lungs. The boy's asthma flared, a constant shadow in his young life, making even the simplest moments a struggle. Kneeling beside him, Clara reached for a small tin of dried sage leaves she had carefully packed from Boston, a remedy passed down through generations. Brewing the fragrant tea with practiced hands, she coaxed Ben to sip the warm liquid slowly. A grateful smile softened Ben's features as the herbal infusion eased the tightness in his chest. His usual restlessness faded, replaced by a quiet calm that spread like a balm over the tense atmosphere. Clara's heart lifted, the most minor victory signaling the beginning of a fragile trust. The boy's innocence and resilience stirred something deep within her, a yearning to protect and nurture in ways she had never imagined possible. Turning her attention to Rose, Clara found the youngest Warrick child sitting on the porch steps, clutching a battered doll missing an eye and frayed at the edges. The child's wide eyes, filled with unspoken longing, met Clara's as she settled beside her. With gentle fingers, Clara began mending the doll's torn dress, weaving each stitch with care and precision learned from years of nursing. Rose's soft and tentative laughter blossomed like a rare flower in the harsh desert soil. The bond forming between them was subtle yet undeniable, stitched together with shared moments of tenderness and care. In Rose's bright gaze, Clara glimpsed the possibility of belonging, a place where love could grow despite loss. Lila, the eldest, lingered at the edge of the yard, her posture stiff, arms folded tightly across her chest. The girl's watchful eyes betrayed a wary nature, shaped by grief and guarded by years of uncertainty. Clara had noticed the worn notebooks tucked beneath Lila's arm, pages filled with delicate poems and sketches, a private world where the girl sought refuge. One afternoon, gathering courage, Clara approached with quiet warmth. "Your poems are beautiful," she said softly, her voice steady yet kind. Lila's lips twitched in surprise, the fortress around her heart cracking just enough to allow a flicker of trust. A shy smile blossomed, tentative and fragile, signaling the first step toward friendship. One afternoon, the ranch hummed with an uneasy energy when a polished black carriage disturbed the dust-choked air. Elias Thornton arrived, his presence sharp and imposing against the rustic backdrop. Thornton wielded power like a weapon, a wealthy, calculating man, his polished veneer masking ruthless intent. His visit was not a courtesy call, but a thinly veiled demand. Jacob must relinquish his water rights or face ruin. The relentless drought tightening its grip on Nevada made Thornton's threats all the more pressing, and the tension between the two men crackled like the dry sagebrush underfoot. Clara watched the confrontation from a distance, her mind racing. The water was lifeblood, the essence of survival for the ranch and its inhabitants. Drawing on her keen intellect and resolve, she suggested reviewing the ancient land records in the dusty attic, documents that might confirm Jacob's rightful claim. Though skeptical, Jacob agreed, allowing Clara to climb the creaky stairs to Bui. The cramped, shadowed space filled with faded ledgers and brittle papers. Hours passed as she carefully examined the fragile texts, piecing together a map of rights and boundaries that could challenge Thornton's power. Her dedication and insight earned a grudging respect from Jacob, a silent acknowledgement of her growing role in their shared struggle. As night fell, the vast Nevada desert transformed into a cathedral of stars. The Milky Way arched overhead, a luminous river flowing through the black sky, its brilliance mirrored by countless pinpoints of light. Clara and the children gathered outside, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of a flickering lantern. They shared stories, laughter, and quiet moments of connection that echoed across the sagebrush plains. The desert's stillness held them gently, a witness to the fragile trust weaving them into a family. Clara's small acts, healing Ben's breath, mending Rose's cherished doll, encouraging Lila's hidden creativity, were threads stitching together, a tapestry of hope and belonging. The scars of past losses softened beneath the weight of new beginnings. Yet, shadows lingered. The threat of Thornton's greed loomed, and Jacob's guarded heart remained a fortress yet to be fully breached. Beneath that endless sky, Clara felt a stirring within her, a slow-burning hope that trust, once broken, could be mended. The children's tentative acceptance was a beacon, a fragile light in the vast desert night. Have you ever found hope in someone you didn't trust at first? Clara's heart might change everything. Clara stood at the edge of the ranch yard, her eyes fixed on the horizon, where the vast Nevada plains stretched endlessly beneath a sky heavy with dust and fading sunlight. The late afternoon wind swept fiercely across the land, carrying the taum, sharp scent of dry earth and sagebrush. Dust devils twisted and twirled like restless spirits, swirling around the weathered barn that had seen better days. The air was thick with tension, an invisible weight pressing down on everything and everyone at the Warrick ranch. Suddenly, hooves thudding against the hard-packed dirt broke the uneasy silence. Clara's heart quickened as rough men rode into view, their faces set in hard lines beneath wide-brimmed hats. They were Thornton's men, who came to deliver a message laced with threat and finality. Jacob emerged from the house, his tall frame tense and unyielding, as the riders approached with harsh words. "You've been stealing water," one of them accused, his voice low but filled with menace. "We know you've been diverting the creek. Thornton says it's theft and he won't tolerate it." The others nodded grimly, their eyes narrowing as they fixed Jacob with unwavering stares. The creek was the ranch's lifeline, a slender water threading through the arid landscape. Without it, the land would wither, crops would fail, and the family's survival would be at stake. Jacob's jaw clenched, the muscles twitching beneath his weather-beaten skin. "That water belongs to this land, same as the air you breathe," he replied quietly, voice steady but cold. The confrontation was inevitable, a looming battle over the right to live and thrive in this harsh desert. Clara listened, intently from the porch, the weight of their words settling deep in her chest. She understood more clearly than ever the precariousness of their existence. Later that evening, as twilight bled into night, Clara crept up the narrow stairs to the attic. The cramped space smelled of dust and forgotten memories, with stacks of brittle papers and faded letters piled in careless heaps. Her fingers trembled as she sifted through the fragile documents, searching desperately for anything to tip the scales in their favor. Finally, tucked beneath a loose floorboard, she found a yellowed envelope bearing the faded script of a Warrick ancestor. Unfolding the letter, Clara read carefully. The words described the creek's course, tracing its winding path through the property and affirming the Warrick family's long-standing claim. The paper crackled softly in her hands, fragile yet powerful, a key to preserving the ranch's future. Hope blossomed within her, a fragile shoot breaking through the hard soil of doubt and fear. But even as she clung to this glimmer of salvation, Clara felt the sting of cruelty in the town's whispered gossip. Once held close and private, her secret had become fodder for cruel tongues. The news of her infertility spread like wildfire, muttering voices casting judgment as if she were less than whole. She sensed the cold glances, the sudden silences when she entered a room, the way conversations tapered off as if she were an unwelcome ghost. The pain was sharp and isolating, but Clara refused to let it define her. In these moments of loneliness, Ben reminded her of her strength. Once struggling for every breath, the boy approached her with quiet gratitude. "Thank you, Miss Clara," he whispered one afternoon, eyes bright with newfound vigor after her herbal treatments. His simple words ignited a fierce resolve within her. She was not just a guest or an outsider. She was becoming a protector, a healer, a vital thread in this fragile family tapestry. Jacob observed from afar, his expression unreadable, but eyes filled with reluctant admiration. He noticed Clara's unwavering dedication, how she cared for the children with fierce tenderness and refused to falter despite the town's harsh judgment. Slowly, the walls around his heart began to erode, the icy grip of grief loosening as Clara's presence warmed the cold spaces left by loss. Her quiet strength was undeniable, a steady flame in the darkest nights. Outside, the Nevada wind continued its restless dance, sweeping over the vast plains and stirring dust into wild spirals. The barn creaked and groaned beneath the assault, its timbers weathered but firmly against the relentless elements. Under the blood-red sky, the ranch seemed to hold its breath, suspended between hope and despair. The night sky stretched vast and endless, stars blazing with fierce clarity against the velvet darkness. The Milky Way arched overhead, a brilliant river of light threading through the cosmos. Beneath this celestial canopy, Clara stood alone on the porch, clutching the faded letter. The weight of her discovery settled heavily upon her, mingling with the uncertain future that awaited. Would Clara's find be enough to save the ranch, to protect the family she had come to love? Or would the cost of her fight demand more than she could give? The desert wind whispered its answer, carrying the question into the night. The dry Nevada air carried a low rumble that grew louder by the minute, a warning from the desert itself. Clara stood outside the cabin, watching the distant horizon darken as a dust storm rolled in violently. The wind began to whip around the ranch, carrying grit and sand that stung her exposed skin and filled her lungs with every sharp breath. The vast sagebrush plains bent and bowed beneath the growing tempest, and the sky shifted from pale blue to a churning wall of ochre and brown, swallowing the sun in its chaotic advance. Shadows lengthened, and the once gentle breeze transformed into a violent gale, rattling the loose boards of the barn and shaking the sturdy log cabin like a vessel caught in a storm. The Warrick children were sheltering inside the barn, but the old structure creaked ominously under the growing pressure. Clara's heart raced as she moved toward the building, her boots crunching over dry dirt littered with small stones and scattered straw. Her mind flashed to Ben, who had struggled with asthma ever since arriving at the ranch. She feared the storm's strength might bring more harm than the children could bear. She quickened her pace, every step driven by a fierce urgency she couldn't ignore. Suddenly, a sharp, splintering crack echoed through the air. The barn's weathered timbers gave way under the relentless wind, sending a cascade of broken wood and debris crashing down with terrifying force. Clara's breath caught as she saw Ben trapped beneath the rubble, his small frame barely visible through the cloud of dust. Panic surged, but she pushed it down, focusing on what she knew. Her nursing skills, her steady hands, and the calm voice she would need to save him. She rushed forward, ignoring the biting sand whipping into her eyes and the raw sting on her cheeks. Kneeling beside Ben, she placed a hand gently on his forehead, feeling the rapid thump of his pulse beneath her palm. "Ben," she whispered urgently, "I'm here. You're going to be all right." Her fingers traced a soothing pattern on his arm as she coaxed him to breathe slowly and steadily, demonstrating each breath with deliberate care. The storm's roar faded slightly in her ears, replaced by the quiet rhythm of her voice and the slow easing of the boy's panic. Minutes felt like hours as Clara worked to keep Ben conscious, her resolve hardening like the unyielding desert stone beneath them. The other children pressed close by, their dusty faces etched with fear but shining with hope. Rose's tiny hand found Clara's, gripping it tightly as if drawing strength from her presence. Lila's usually reserved demeanor melted into tears, and she stroked Ben's hair, a silent prayer on her lips. Jacob arrived with forceful strides, shoving debris aside with raw determination. His hands were rough, but careful as he freed Ben from the wreckage. The boy collapsed into Jacob's arms, coughing but alive, his chest rising and falling with the steady breaths Clara had worked so hard to restore. Jacob's gaze met Clara's dark, eyes filled with gratitude and something more profound, respect, admiration, perhaps even something unspoken and fragile. For a moment, the storm's chaos seemed to pause around them. Jacob's hand lingered on Clara's, a silent connection forged through shared danger and quiet courage. The weight of unspoken feelings hung heavy in the air, mingling with the dust and fading light. The children gathered close to Clara, their voices soft, but affectionately filled. Rose, her cheeks streaked with dirt but glowing with adoration, looked up at Clara and whispered, "Miss Clara." The sincere and straightforward title was a balm to Clara's weary spirit. Here, amid the rugged plains and relentless wind, she had found a place where she was needed and mattered. When the storm finally passed, Clara climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, the cramped space heavy with the scent of old wood and forgotten memories. The lantern's flickering light cast long shadows over piles of dusty papers and brittle maps. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded a weathered survey map, edges worn and ink faded with time. The lines traced familiar boundaries, marking the creek that sustained the Warrick Ranch, proof of Jacob's rightful claim. This fragile document was more than paper. It was a lifeline, a key to protecting the family she had come to love. Outside, the desert was quiet again, the mountains standing tall and silent beneath the glittering stars. Sand sparkled in the moonlight, 1,000 tiny diamonds scattered across the earth's harsh surface. Clara held the map close, her heart pounding with fierce hope. The battle for survival was far from over, but with courage and determination, she could fight not just for herself, but for this family, this home. Have you ever risked everything for someone you barely knew? Clara's courage could redefine her future. The town hall stood grim beneath a sky swollen with thick, rolling clouds that churned like a brewing tempest. Outside, Nevada's relentless wind tore across the sagebrush plains, lifting spirals of dust and debris that clawed at the windows, rattling the fragile panes with an eerie persistence. The heavy wooden doors creaked as the townsfolk filtered inside, filling the cramped room with low murmurs and rustling coats. Faces lined with hardship, suspicion, or tired hope turned toward the front, where the fate of the Warrick Ranch would be decided. Inside, the atmosphere was charged, electric, with tension that vibrated like a tightening noose. Voices were hushed, but fierce under the weight of years-old grudges and desperate needs. Ranchers and townspeople eyed one another warily, torn between loyalty and survival in this harsh, arid land where every drop of water carried immeasurable value. Some wore skepticism openly, others masked it behind polite nods or cold stares. All sensed that the battle about to unfold would ripple through the community for years. Clara stood near the rear, shoulders squared, though her heart pounded fiercely. She felt every gaze as a blade, some curious, others doubtful, and a few openly hostile. The rumors of her infertility had slithered through the town like venom, poisoning minds and closing doors. She knew whispers followed her footsteps. She heard the clipped tones behind polite greetings and saw the averted eyes. But retreat was no longer an option. This day demanded courage beyond personal fears, a stand for the family she had come to cherish. At the center of the room, Elias Thornton commanded attention. His presence filled the space like a dark cloud, polished and imposing in tailored clothes that set him apart from the weather-beaten ranchers. Thornton's voice cut through the murmurs, smooth yet filled with ruthless certainty, as he unfurled a large, pristine survey map. The paper gleamed under the lantern light, crisp and stark, a glaring contrast to the yellowed, fragile map Clara clutched hidden beneath her coat. "This map," Thornton began, voice dripping with authority, "proves that the creek running through the Warrick property belongs to me. Jacob Warrick has been unlawfully diverting water for years. This trespass harms us all and threatens our survival during this brutal drought. The law is clear. The water must be returned to its rightful owner." His sharp eyes swept the crowd, seeking to cement his dominance. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some shifted uneasily while others leaned in, willing to believe Thornton's polished claims. But on the opposite side stood Jacob, broad-shouldered and weathered by loss, his expression grim but resolute. His fingers clenched and unclenched at his sides, muscles taut beneath sun-darkened skin. Beside him, Lila, the 11-year-old girl who had watched the battle unfold silently for months, suddenly stepped forward. Her face, usually a mask of quiet caution, blazed with fierce determination. When the venomous whispers about Clara's infertility erupted like poison, Lila's voice rang out, pure and unyielding. "She's ours!" The words struck like a hammer blow, shattering the oppressive silence and freezing the room. Heads turned, in shock at the girl's bold proclamation. Her eyes locked onto the nearest doubters, burning with protective fire far beyond her years. It was a moment of raw defiance born of love and loss, a child staking claim not just to a woman, but to a family that had begun to heal under her mother's absent warmth. The crowd held its breath, the weight of that simple declaration sinking deep into hardened hearts. Emboldened by Lila's courage, Clara stepped forward, carefully lifting the worn, fragile map from beneath her coat. The paper trembled slightly in her hands, but held undeniable proof of the Warrick's rights. The true boundaries etched long ago by ancestors who had carved their claim through desert and stone. Under the dim lantern glow, the inked lines and faded annotations spoke louder than any words could. The room leaned in, whispers morphing into murmurings of disbelief and hope. Clara's voice, steady and clear, carried across the hall. "This map shows the creek belongs to the Warrick family. It proves what Thornton's forged survey cannot. We stand not just on claims of land, but on the truth of generations." Jacob moved closer, placing a steadying hand over Clara's. His gaze met hers, a silent vow that they faced this trial together. The touch grounded her, lending strength. where fear threatened to rise. Around them, the crowd's mood shifted. The tide of doubt receded, replaced by flickers of trust and tentative support. Outside, the storm finally broke. Lightning cracked across the roiling sky, followed by thunder that shook the rafters. The desert wind howled, rattling the windows and stirring the swirling dust into frenzied dances. The tempest mirrored the battle within the town hall, a clash of power and principle, survival and truth. Voices rose, arguments flared, and the fate of the ranch hung precariously in balance. Clara's heart pounded, every beat echoing the fierce hope kindling within her. This was more than a water dispute. It was a fight for belonging, for dignity, for the fragile family she had vowed to protect. Could Clara's evidence save the Warricks, or would Thornton retaliate with a force they hadn't yet faced? The storm outside was not the only one gathering strength. The Nevada desert night draped the Warrick ranch in a profound stillness, as though the earth held its breath. Above, the sky stretched infinitely, a vast dome punctuated by stars that flickered like distant lanterns guiding lost travelers home. The Milky Way arced overhead, a luminous river spilling light across the darkness, ancient and eternal. The faint glow of moonlight bathed the sagebrush in silver hues, their leaves rustling softly as a gentle breeze whispered through the quiet plains. The worn wooden cabin glowed warmly in this serene sanctuary from the hearth's flickering flames, offering refuge from the wildness beyond. Inside, Clara and Jacob sat near the hearth, the firelight casting dancing shadows across their faces, revealing vulnerability seldom shared. The weight of the past hung heavy in the air, unspoken but felt deeply, pressing upon their hearts like the desert's vast, unyielding silence. Jacob's eyes, usually guarded and distant, softened as he finally broke the stillness. His voice was low, roughened by years of sorrow yet laced with tentative hope. "I've lived in the shadow of loss for so long," he admitted quietly, each word deliberate. "Since my wife died, I shut myself away, locked my heart tight, afraid to love again. The ranch, the children, they were all I had left. But you, your presence has started to mend something broken inside me. Your warmth has brought light to this family, when I thought only darkness remained." Clara's breath caught, a swell of emotion tightening her throat. She reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing against Jacob's hand. The touch was small, but mighty, a silent bridge spanning years of grief and fear. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke, revealing the depths of a pain she had long kept hidden. "There's something I've carried alone, a shame I thought I'd never share," she confessed, eyes meeting his with raw honesty. "When I was a child, scarlet fever took more than my health. It took my chance to bear children. I feared you would see me as incomplete, less than whole. But here, with you and the kids, I've discovered that family isn't just blood or biology. It's love. It's trust. It's being seen and accepted for who you are." A quiet understanding passed between them, the kind that doesn't need words. The flicker of the flames mirrored the fragile hope blooming in their hearts. Outside, the desert breathed softly, a lullaby of rustling sagebrush and distant coyote calls. Time seemed to slow, the world narrowing to this intimate circle of two souls entwined by shared pain and burgeoning affection. The soft creak of the cabin door gently interrupted their quiet moment. Lila, Ben, and Rose stepped inside, their faces, illuminated by the firelight, glimmering with shy anticipation. The children approached hesitantly, clutching a small, carefully wrapped bundle. Rose, her eyes bright and earnest, spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper, yet full of meaning. "For you, Miss Clara," she said, holding out the gift with trembling hands. Clara's eyes softened as she slowly accepted the package, unwrapping it to reveal a beautifully crafted scarf. The fabric was soft wool, dyed in rich, warm colors, reminiscent of the desert sunset. Fiery oranges blending into gentle purples, woven together with delicate care. Each stitch was a testament to the children's affection, a tangible symbol of the bond growing stronger between them. She wrapped the scarf around her shoulders, feeling the comforting weight and warmth settle over her like a protective embrace. The children smiled, their faces alight with pride and love, and Jacob's gaze lingered on Clara with an expression of quiet admiration and relief. The cabin seemed to pulse with newfound life and promise at that moment. Lila stepped forward, her usual quiet reserve replaced by confidence from witnessing Clara's gentle strength. "We wanted you to have something to remember us by," she said softly, her voice steady and sincere. "You're part of our family now." Ben nodded, his asthma momentarily forgotten in the glow of belonging. "You make things better, Missy." "Clara," he added, his words simple but filled with deep gratitude. Outside, the night sky deepened into a velvet black, the Milky Way's brilliance undiminished as it stretched across the heavens. The desert around the ranch shimmered faintly, under the moon's glow, the sagebrush leaves glistening with dew, a subtle sparkle that mirrored the fragile hope blossoming within the cabin walls. Jacob reached out, pulling Clara gently into a quiet embrace. "We've all been broken," he murmured against her hair, "but together, maybe we can heal." Clara rested her head against his chest, her heart swelling with fierce, quiet joy. For the first time since her arrival in Nevada, she felt truly seen, not as a woman marked by loss, but as a vital part of this imperfect, beautiful family. Have you ever found a family where you least expected? Clara's heart is about to decide her fate. The territorial courtroom sat heavy with anticipation, its wooden walls echoing with whispers that swirled like the desert winds outside. Ranchers, townsfolk, and officials filled every creaking chair, faces drawn tight with hope and anxiety. Clara stood at Jacob's side, clutching the fragile survey map that had become their shield against Elias Thornton's unyielding threats. The faded parchment bore the legacy of generations, etched lines proving the creek winding through the Warrick. Property was theirs by right. Every eye in the room turned to the judge as he prepared to speak, the weight of their future balanced on his words. Judge Ramsey, a stern man with decades of service etched into his furrowed brow, cleared his throat and adjusted his spectacles. His voice cut through the charged silence with deliberate authority. "After thoroughly examining the evidence and testimonies presented," he declared, "this court affirms that the water rights in dispute belong indisputably to Jacob Warrick and his heirs. The creek, essential to the survival of the Warrick Ranch, has been lawfully theirs for generations." A collective breath swept through the courtroom, releasing months of tension and fear. Jacob exhaled deeply, his rigid posture softening as relief washed over him. His sun-beaten face broke into a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes that had seen loss, struggle, and hardship, but now gleamed with quiet triumph. Clara's heart surged, The victory was more than just legal. It was the salvation of their home, their life. Elias Thornton stood stiffly in the corner, his polished boots planted firmly on the worn floor. His expression betrayed grudging respect, a subtle acknowledgement of defeat cloaked behind a veneer of arrogance. Without a word, he turned on his heel, the door closing with a heavy thud behind him. The battle was won, but the war for peace and belonging began. Outside, the world seemed to hold its breath as the setting sun ignited the sky in a blaze of gold and crimson. The ranch lay bathed in the warm glow of twilight, every leaf of sagebrush sparkling as if dipped in molten light. The Sierra Nevada mountains loomed majestically, their jagged peaks outlined against the fading light like silent guardians watching over the land. The air was rich with the scent of sun-baked earth and wildflowers, a fragrant promise of renewal and hope. Jacob led Clara to the porch where the children waited, their faces alight with joy and relief. Lila's usually reserved smile blossomed into radiant laughter. Ben's eyes sparkled with mischief, and Rose clapped her hands, her small voice ringing excitedly. Once shadowed by threat and uncertainty, the ranch buzzed with life and possibility. Jacob turned to Clara, the weight of everything unspoken hanging in the air. He dropped to one knee with steady hands, catching her gaze with unwavering sincerity. The world seemed to pause around them, the only sound the gentle rustling of sagebrush in the evening breeze. "Clara," he began, voice thick with emotion yet steady, "you've become the heart of this family. Your strength, kindness, and courage have brought us through the darkest times. Will you marry me? Will you make this place, this life, our forever home?" Tears blurred Clara's vision, warmth flooding her chest as she nodded, her voice catching in her throat. The scarf the children had lovingly woven fluttered softly around her shoulders, symbolizing the family she had fought so hard to join. The sea. Kids erupted into cheers and applause, their joyous voices rising like a chorus that carried across the sprawling plains. Neighbors and friends joined in, the celebration a testament to endurance, love, and the unbreakable bonds forged in hardship. As twilight deepened into night, Clara found a quiet moment alone by the old wooden fence bordering the ranch. She pulled the Boston ticket from her pocket, the ticket that once represented a chance to escape, to return to a life left behind. She tore it into tiny pieces with a resolute breath, watching the fragments scattered on the desert wind. Each scrap was a surrender of her past, a declaration of her choice to embrace Nevada's rugged beauty and raw honesty. The golden hues of sunset gave way to a sky strewn with stars, the Milky Way stretching endlessly above like a luminous ribbon. The mountains stood silhouetted against the night, eternal and unyielding. Clara's heart swelled with hope and uncertainty, the promise of tomorrow mingling with the shadows of challenges yet to come. Though victory had been won, the future remained unwritten. Would the love forged in fire withstand the trials ahead? Could this new life, born from pain and perseverance, endure the storms still looming on the horizon? The desert whispered its ancient secrets, and Clara listened with a heart ready to face whatever came next. 6 months had passed since the judge's ruling, and the Warrick ranch thrived under the care of its newfound family. Clara moved through the sunlit fields with a sense of purpose that radiated from her every step. The children followed her closely, eager to learn and grow beneath her patient guidance. Lila recited poems she had penned, her voice confident and clear as Clara encouraged her creativity. Ben's breathing had steadied, and his asthma was now managed with the herbal remedies Clara carefully prepared, allowing him to run and play with newfound energy. Rose, ever the bright spirit, clutched her beloved doll, meticulously repaired by Clara's loving hands, and drifted peacefully to sleep each night, comforted by the warmth surrounding her. The ranch itself reflected the changes within the family. After rare rains swept through the arid desert, the land burst into life, wildflowers blooming amid the sagebrush. Dew sparkled on leaves and grass like tiny jewels, catching the early morning sun and casting prisms of light across the rugged terrain. The Sierra Nevada mountains stood proudly in the distance, their peaks glistening under a vibrant sunrise that painted the sky with pink, gold, and lavender hues. Jacob and Clara worked side by side, tending to the chores and the children with a harmony born of mutual respect and love. Their hardships seemed to fade into memory, replaced by a steady rhythm of hope and belonging. Lila's voice calling "Mother" echoed softly through the house, a title Clara wore with quiet pride and gratitude. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the sparkling sagebrush, Clara paused to gaze upon the land she now called home. The journey from rejection to acceptance, from solitude to family, had transformed her life in ways she never imagined possible. Her heart was whole, her spirit strong, and her future intertwined with those she loved. Suppose Clara's journey from rejection to love touched your heart. Like and share this video to spread her story of courage. Don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Comment below. Which city and country are you watching from? We'd love to hear from you.